Good evening. My name is Rebecca Kirkpatrick, and I am one of the pastors here at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church. On behalf of my colleagues and the members of this congregation, it is my privilege to welcome you all here this evening as we celebrate the strength of our interfaith community here in Greater Philadelphia. One of the long-standing priorities of this congregation is to be thoughtfully engaged on matters of faith and life in ways that stretch and challenge our understanding of the world around us, and then to take that new understanding out into the world through acts of compassion, justice, and partnership. Our partnership and commitment to the work of Interfaith Philadelphia is essential because of the ways that it equips and engages us as a church in both of those endeavors. It is an honor for us to once again be able to host this event here at BMPC tonight. So I invite you now to join me in a moment of invocation. As we gather here today, we come from different backgrounds, cultures, and faiths, yet we stand united in our desire for peace, understanding, and harmony. We take a moment to pause and reflect on the beauty of our diversity, the richness of our shared experiences, and the strength of our collective spirit. We invoke the divine presence, known by many names and expressed in many forms, to guide us in our endeavors to build bridges of understanding and compassion among all people. May we continue to learn from one another, to celebrate our differences, and to work together for the greater good of all. As we go forth from this gathering, may we carry with us the spirit of unity and the commitment to serve our community with grace, humility, dedication, and may peace be with us all. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. Past and current board members, staff, family, friends, program participants, sponsors, and supporters, welcome. My name is Kaiser Abdullah, and I currently serve as the board chair for Interfaith Philadelphia. I welcome you to this year's Dare to Understand Awards as presented by Interfaith Philadelphia. Thank you very much, Reverend Rebecca, for beginning the evening with that beautiful invocation. Thank you to Bryn Mawr Presbyterian Church for being a great partner and gracious host. Our gratitude to you for allowing us to return to this space. Thank you to our honoree, Valerie Kaur, for the willingness to accept this honor and the invitation. We look forward to your remarks. This year has been another year for growth for Interfaith Philadelphia. We continue to look internally at our processes and our own identity, collectively and individually, and how we as individuals and as an organization are navigating these challenges. And we have chosen to continue to ask the very important question: what do we still need to understand? What have we not yet dared to understand? We have seen staff transition away from Interfaith Philadelphia, and we have seen staff join Interfaith Philadelphia. Welcome and thank you. We've seen new board members join our ranks and roll up their sleeves and get to work, and we see former board members who continue to support us, work with us, and cheer us on. To you, I say thank you. The Leadership Institute of Interfaith Philadelphia is up and running, and we're looking forward to seeing it grow and to become a place that everyone looks towards for their training and support on how to create understanding in spaces that need it most. Thank you to those who continue to join us and learn with us. Tonight, we lift up our honoree, Valerie Kaur. Valerie, see no stranger, epitomizes the transformative work that Interfaith Philadelphia strives to do, and might I add, continues to do, because we do it so well. I can say that, right? This award, which was inaugurated in 2012, honors individuals of distinction who have fostered interfaith understanding and service in our communities and beyond. It celebrates those who boldly dare to understand and have dared to be understood. It applauds the courage it takes to cross lines of difference in order to work together for the common good. Valerie Kaur joins the ranks of the distinguished humanitarians who have received this award in the past, whose names are found in your program and on our website, and some of whom are with us tonight. We are pleased to have Helen Cunningham, Dr. Giddy Edemat, Reverend Richard Fernandez, and Mylan Coons, who is online with us, and Lauren Silverman. All of them are present tonight. To all past recipients and those representing the past recipients, please indicate your presence in whatever way is most comfortable for you. You may stand, you may raise your virtual hand, you may shout out a joyous scream or rant or chant, or even a moment of quiet reflection. And as you can see, I resisted saying, put your lighters in the air. Tonight's program is possible thanks to the generosity of so many of you who chose to donate to this event and invest in our work. We are especially grateful to all of our sponsors tonight whose names are listed in your program, with special gratitude to Maverick Partners Wealth Management. I want to take a moment to express my deep and personal appreciation, and I am sure that of many others in this audience, present and online, for the board and staff of Interfaith Philadelphia, whose dedication and hard work has kept this important work going for the past few years, and hopefully, by God's grace, for many years to come. You have been an inspiration to us all. Please give them and yourselves a round of applause. We humbly ask that during the award presentation, no photos be taken. The photos taken by our photographer will be shared following the event. Thank you for being present. I now invite Reverend Joyce Shin to the podium for the presentation of the award.
Thank you, Kaiser. Have you ever struggled to wonder about someone whose words and actions, views and beliefs seem incomprehensible and even offensive to you? Have you ever felt safe enough to extend that wonder to someone who caused irreparable harm to you? Have you ever worn yourself out with works of compassion for those around you? These are the real questions that every person runs into again and again when they dedicate themselves to remaking our world into the just world that it should be. As all of our faith traditions witness, such social transformation is long and hard work. They are questions that our Dare to Understand award recipient tonight has experienced firsthand, and that she fiercely seeks to make sense of for our times, so that these generations, ours and the future, might be sustained in our efforts to transform the world around us. Identifying herself as a warrior at heart, Valerie Kaur does not want the intensity of activism to burn out. She does not want our labor to be in vain, resulting in gains that are short-lived. That is why Valerie Kaur assembles wisdom for this work that will enable us to be revolutionaries for the long run. She gains this wisdom by listening, showing up in crises, and then staying around and returning again for conversations. She has listened to victims and perpetrators, to allies and opponents. She has listened to elders in both her family and the wider Sikh community, and to generations of women to learn what they could teach us about resilience in the face of violence, oppression, and discrimination. She has listened to families and communities impacted by unjust policies and practices. Their wisdom is hard-won, and in this way it is appropriate that by putting to use such wisdom, we can become what she calls warrior sages. The more time we spend in conversation with Valerie Kaur, I think it will become clear that she believes everyone can be a warrior sage. We can make change that stands the test of time if we ground it in wisdom about how to love others, our opponents, and ourselves. Without wisdom about how to love on all these fronts, how could any of our religious communities have endured the test of time? It is as much needed today as it has always been. Therefore, with gratitude for her work that marries the warrior spirit with wisdom, Interfaith Philadelphia presents to Valerie Kaur the Dare to Understand Award. I'm coming down to present it. Valerie, this award is a print of a work called Understanding, presented and painted by artist Krista Bard, and it is for you. We are about to hear from Valerie, and after that, Trina Gary, a longtime friend of Interfaith Philadelphia, will be interviewing her here.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. The beloved community belongs to divine oneness, and so does all that it achieves. Let us honor the indigenous ancestors of this soil, the Lenni Lenape people, their courage and wisdom, past, present, and future. Thank you so much for this incredible honor. Thank you for your witness. Thank you for your solidarity. Thank you for your love. I am here with you tonight, Interfaith Philadelphia, because I believe that the social, political, and economic crises of our time are fueled by a deeper spiritual crisis, a constriction of the human heart, the choice to stand for some of us instead of all of us in policy, in word, and in deed. And that means that we need sound government. We need just policies. And the only way that we will birth that world that we dream is through a shift in culture and consciousness. A way of being, a way of seeing that leaves no one outside of our circle of care. What we need is a revolution of the heart, what I call revolutionary love. I believe that revolutionary love is the call of our times. That is the love that called you here tonight. When did you first hear that call? It has come down on the lips of spiritual teachers and indigenous healers for thousands of years, hasn't it? Jesus called us to love our neighbor. Abraham to open our tent to all. Muhammad to take in the orphan. Buddha taught unending compassion. Mirabai sang of a love without limit. Guru Nanak said, "Nako beri nahi begana," I see no enemy, I see no stranger. They all invited us to expand the circle of who counts as one of us, to include all of us. And that call to love was rooted in this recognition of our interconnectedness. We share the same biological ancestry of everyone alive. We are all we're made up of compounds cooked in the bellies of long-distance stars. We can look upon the face of anyone and say, "You are a part of me I do not yet know. You are a part of me I do not yet know." The human species first awoke to this level of consciousness and what we now call the axial age. And this awakening is the root of all modern-day declarations of human rights. And now our very future as a nation and as a species depends on whether we can put this ethic of love into practice on a scale we have never had before. And so after 20 years of laboring in the trenches for racial justice in this country, I was tired of organizing around hate. I asked myself, what might it be to organize around love? And the question how seized me. How? How do we put it into practice? And so I had a gift that very few women of color are ever given. I was given a room of my own. I spent a year in the rainforest with my family. I poured through the stories of social movements and wisdom traditions, looking for patterns, trying to answer these questions until I began to see what I now call practices of revolutionary love. And this is the offering I bring here for you tonight. And as I talk you through my discoveries, I ask you to listen for what medicine you might need to be brave with your life. It begins with a definition. Love is more than a rush of emotion. Love is more than a rush of feeling or thoughts and prayers. Love is sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, life-giving, a choice we make again and again. And when we choose to love beyond what evolution requires, when we take a little bit of that kind of love we have for our babies and our parents and our loved ones, when we take a little bit of, just a fraction of that kind of love out beyond our inner circle, then our love has the power to transform the world around us. Our love becomes revolutionary. I found 3 practices of revolutionary love. How do we love others, even those we might not know or yet understand? I call this practice tend, see no stranger. See no stranger. And this practice is rooted in the act of wonder. Wonder is the wellspring of love. So imagine walking down the street and looking at faces on the screen or in the subway and saying, "Sister, brother, sibling, beloved, you are a part of me I do not yet know." And when we do that, we are retraining our eye to see all others as kin. Now, it sounds very simple, but our minds decide within a fraction of a second whether the person in front of us belongs to us or them. We all carry implicit bias within us. And so when we choose to see no stranger, sister, brother, sibling, we are engaging in a powerful anti-racist practice. Who we see as one of us determines what we do, who we show up for, whose story we listen to, what grief we choose to carry, who we show up for, what policies we support, what leaders we elect. Demagogues are able to succeed in their agendas of dehumanizing entire groups of people when they shut down our capacity to wonder. Now you might ask yourself, well, if I open myself to other people's stories, what about all of that grief There is so much grief in the air right now. We risk being overwhelmed by other people's pain, and this is what I wish to tell you. There is no fixing grief. There's only surviving it, bearing it, and the only way we can bear grief is together. What grief are you carrying in your bodies? What grief have you not shown anyone out of shame or fear? What grief in another is waiting to be tended to? Now imagine the grief that entire communities are holding right now. You do not need to know people in order to grieve with them. You grieve with them in order to know them. And if we can find the courage in us not to take on the world's grief, but just the grief that is ours, just the hand to hold, the text, the lit candle, the vigil, if we find that courage, then we know that we are engaging in a revolutionary act. For any time in U.S. history when people who had no obvious reason to love one another came together to grieve, they gave rise to new relationships, even revolutions. Grieving with each other gives us the information for how to fight for each other, how to stand for each other, how to marshal that warrior spirit to protect another's dignity and safety. And that's what we need now, wondering about one another, grieving with each other, finding the courage to fight for each other. That is the practice of seeing no stranger. To dare to understand the other is how we begin to love. Now, this brings us to the second practice, because if we're fighting the good fight, then what happens when the other in front of us becomes an opponent? This practice I call tend the wound. Notice I don't use the word enemy. An enemy is a fixed and permanent identity, and an opponent is a fluid category. And what I've come to understand is that there are no such thing as monsters in this world. Only human beings who are wounded, who say what they say or do what they do out of their fear or insecurity or despair or greed or rage. That does not make them any less dangerous, but when some of us are brave enough to see their wound, they lose their power over us. We see their humanity. And this is not just a moral act, this is a strategic act, because then we can ask ourselves, what are the stories? What are the institutions? What are the norms? What are the policies? What are the algorithms that drive that behavior? And then we can fight smarter. Tending the wound in our opponents. Before we can even take that step, it begins with tending our own wound. And this, I think, too many of us who are engaging in nonviolent practices, this is the step that we miss, that when we are wronged, it's okay to feel rage, to honor your rage. How many of us have been taught to suppress our rage in the name of love? But the task is not to suppress it or to let it explode, but to process that rage in safe containers. And once we move that energy in our body, we can ask ourselves, what information does my rage carry? How do I wish to harness that energy for what I do in the world? And I call that harnessed energy divine rage. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance. The aim of divine rage is to reorder the world. And that may free up some spaciousness inside of you to choose to wonder even about our opponent. So that next step is to listen to the wound in the opponent. And I know this is challenging work for so many of us. And so here's what I wish to tell you. If you have a knee on your neck, it is not necessarily your role to look up at your opponent and try to wonder about them. No, my love, your role is to take the next breath. That is your revolutionary act. But if you are someone who is safe enough or brave enough to tend to even those kinds of opponents, we need you now. We need you in that labor, for if you're not sitting with them, who is? And here's what I wish to tell you, that the goal of listening is not necessarily to legitimize them or compromise with them or even change them. The goal of listening is to understand them, to dare to understand them. For when we understand them, we gather information for what drives their wound, and we might begin to reimagine an outcome, a world, a future that leaves no one behind, not even them. The only way we're going to transition America is into a multiracial democracy is if we hold up a vision of a future where we, the people, includes all the people. This is long labor, and this is courageous labor. How to love others, see no stranger, how to love our opponents, tend the wound. There's one more practice we need if we're going to last, and that is how to love ourselves. This is the feminist intervention. This is me sitting at the feet of Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, who taught us that we cannot succeed if the movements are fought on our backs or over our dead bodies. And so this practice, the name of this practice, I take from the wisdom of the midwife. She says, breathe and push. She doesn't say, okay, push all the way. No. She says, breathe, my love, and then push, and then breathe again. There's a certain cadence, a kind of rhythm to sustain our energy through any long labor, the labor of running a church, or serving a community, or raising a family, or rebirthing a nation. We have to be putting enough breath in our bodies in order to know when and how to push. So I ask you, how are you breathing every day? Are you feeling ashamed when you take time to get still? Or are you embracing your body as worthy of love? Are you breathing with music and meditation and prayer and poetry? Are you breathing with the ocean, with the stars, with the rivers? Are you breathing with each other? Who are you breathing with? And who are you helping to breathe? For only when we breathe do we have the energy to make that next push in our lives. And only when we breathe do we create the conditions to let joy in. Joy is the gift of love. How are you protecting your joy every day? In my faith, in the Sikh faith, we call it Jadvikala, ever-rising spirits, ever-rising joy, even in darkness. As you're listening to me tonight, I ask you, what is the medicine that you need? How to love others, see no stranger, how to love our opponents, tend the wound, how to love ourselves, breathe and push. Imagine if the people around you were practicing love in this way. Imagine if the church you are part of, the house of worship you belong to, if the school that you serve, if the community you live in, if the city you are part of made this kind of love the foundation for how to be together. You see, revolutions happen not just in those big public moments. Revolutions happen in the spaces where people come together to inhabit a new way of being. That is Dr. King's revolution of values. That's the revolution we are after, the quiet revolution, the lasting revolution. Welcome to the revolution. Because I believe that out of the ashes of genocide and slavery and oppression, that we can be the ones to birth a new America, where we see no stranger and you see my child as yours and I see yours as mine. I believe out of the ashes of insurrection and tyranny, fascism, and war, that we can be the ones who usher in a new dominant consciousness, with the understanding that we are one human family, so supremacists and demagogues in small-town arenas or on world stages become relics of history, and democracy becomes a sacred practice. I believe that out of the ashes of fires and climate catastrophes, that we will be the ones to teach humanity how to live sustainably with the earth as a global community for the first time in history, rooted in the recognition of our oneness. If we are brave enough to breathe and push, say it with me, breathe and push, say it with me, breathe and push louder, breathe and push louder, breathe and push, keep going, breathe and push, keep going, breathe and push for justice, breathe and push for healing, breathe and push for mercy, breathe and push for truth, breathe and push for love, breathe and push for love, breathe and push for love, breathe and push for you, breathe and push for me, breathe and push for us. Thank you so much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for this book, and if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. Transformative, and that's coming from someone who loves books, and I will say that I don't tend to read one book over because there's so many good books out there to read, but this one I have already.
Oh, thank you.
And it's for more than just because I knew I was going to meet you. Just wonderful, just wonderful. I wanted to begin with something, a practice that I got in my childhood. And it's one of, my mom said to me, always give people their flowers while they're here. And so I want to share with you some flowers that came from the Interfaith Community Book Club as they were reading your book. And I'll share a few now, and I want to share one at closing. I felt that Valerie Kaur created a path to seeing the humanity of the other, hearing them and listening to them. This is so very crucial in these difficult times when we so often may turn from others who have views that differ from our own, another said. I also felt hope from her suggestion to imagine a better world and the idea that doing so is the first step to actually creating it. Valerie has become a wonderful guide for me on this path. Her thoughts, words, and personal experiences have helped me look deeper and begin to see humanity through the eyes of wonder. That new way of seeing, listening has made a huge impact on me. And then another. I have believed that we are all one in spirit for some time now. But my mortal mind sometimes forgets when I face fear or hatred. What would you say to this person, Valerie?
You're not alone. First of all, I just feel like I'm carrying this big basket of flowers, so I'm just going to set it next to me. It's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for breathing and pushing with me. You know, that for me, it is that final practice about how to love ourselves that took me the longest. That in a way, I could look upon other people and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. I even had the courage to sit with people who I wanted to hate, former white supremacists, prison guards, and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. But anytime I could hear the voice of the little critic in me, the voice of fear, the voice of cruelty, not toward others, but toward myself, that voice that said, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not strong enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough to do the thing. I came to realize that I had to use that wonder practice on myself. I had to say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. That voice of fear, I wanted to drown, I wanted to strangle, I wanted to burn, I was quite violent. You know, it's like, no, the wise woman in me said, no, my love, you need this little guy. I don't know why he's a guy. Because you need this little guy, he's part of you. You are a part of me I do not yet know. We just don't need him in charge. So I had to ask myself, what information are you carrying? Why are you afraid? And the thing is, the little critic was right. It isn't safe for women of color, for sick women, for activists to stand up in a time like this and call for love and justice. The little critic was just wrong about the solution. The solution is not silence, it's more solidarity. I just have to do what I'm doing, stand up in the way that I dream, just not alone. I have to be with my sister. That's why Ashley from the Revolutionary Love Project is here, right? That's why I wanted to be with you all here tonight. It's like, this is our community. We can stand in love and justice and dignity together. So anytime the little critic arises, this is what I wish to tell that reader. Don't feel ashamed of it. Don't try to push it away. Wonder about it. What information is it carrying? And then conjure the wisdom in you to say, okay, well, you are brave enough, my love. You are brave enough. We don't go to battle alone. We don't give birth alone. So who can breathe and push with you so you can still stand, speak, do, become what the world needs?
Thank you. Your metaphor that you use, love as labor, and thinking of the stages of childbirth, and as you were preparing for your birth of your second child and writing, just resonated on a level of really thinking about the stages of love. You say, joy is the gift of love. Grief is the price of love. Anger protects that which is loved. And when we think we have reached our limit, wonder is the act that returns us to love. How did writing See No Stranger change you?
Beautiful. I want to say first that writing had saved my own life. I had been writing this book for 20 years. When I came back from crossing the country with my camera after September 11th, capturing all the stories of racial violence not making the news, I took my first book writing class in college, and I was writing the stories in that class that you are reading in chapter 2. I sent the book proposal off and got a stack of rejection letters. This was in 2004. They said there was no audience for such a book. And if it was just my stories, maybe I would have stopped, but I kept going. I kept living the stories and writing them, living them and writing them, living them and writing them. I was afraid. Oliver Wendell Holmes has a saying, like, don't die with all the music still inside of you. You know, I thought that would be my fate. But I was fortunate, you know, all those years I kept writing, and then 2016 election, between the election and the inauguration, I wrote book proposal, 2016, revolutionary love is the call of our times. I tried to understand what all of those stories added up to, and perhaps it took that long for a black editor, Chris Jackson, to gain a position of power, to gain a desk at Random House so that my proposal could land on his desk. And when he said yes to this book, he gave me an oxygen tank. I stepped back from the front lines for the first time, and that's when I moved to the rainforest. And it was like taking the deepest breath I had ever taken. I had just been pushing all along. And so I had to figure out how to come back to the country in a way that would last. I had to figure out how to make love my compass. And so writing See No Stranger was saving my own life. Creating the compass that you find in the back of the book, finding those 3 practices was a way for me to know that I could come back and grow old in this work, that I could find joy in this work, that I could last in this work. And I've felt so fortunate that coming back with the medicine, it turns out that it can feed others too, that we can last together. Like, I want to grow old with all of you. And I believe that we can do that if we're not running on the fumes of hostility for others or for ourselves. We can do that when love is the wellspring.
You know, right before coming up here, a sister behind me was talking about how the young people today need this message. So many ways, we all need it. But I really think about the trauma, the trauma they're experiencing, and wonder, how would you encourage those young ones? What will you tell them, or what can you say to them that will help them to access what they need in order to reach that revolutionary love, that wonder?
First, if you're breathless right now, your breathlessness is not a sign of your weakness. Your breathlessness is a sign that you are awake. You are awake to what's happening. The world is in transition. Young people are coming of age in a time when everything that we have known to be true is unraveling. The country is in transitioning, struggling to become a multiracial democracy. The human race is transitioning, struggling to become a global community that knows how to live in a loving relationship with the earth. And so, my love, your breathlessness is information that you are brave enough to be awake. And so I ask you, who puts breath in your body? Take a breath in, and then place a hand on your heart and know that you are not alone. The ancestors are behind us, the ancestors who have survived and who know how to last. And so every time I gather, especially young people, I call in the ancestors, we breathe together, and I ask them to find that wonder inside of them, beginning with themselves, and then others, and then emanate from there. I feel like with ancestors behind us and beloved community around us, that's the only way we have the ability to show up to our particular role.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you speak so beautifully about is the power of wonder. And that aligns with Interfaith Philadelphia's passport to understanding. Curiosity is that first level of in that passport. It's very similar to wonder. When we wonder about people, we are less likely to rely on our stereotypes alone. It's sort of a theme that I picked up in your book. You say, when we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of those we see as part of us. You use language also, similar to Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum's work, in which you reference, when you suggest stereotypes are in the air we breathe, visible on TV and film, news, etc. We can internalize them, and as you say, become strange to ourselves.
Yes.
How do we encourage people to wonder even about themselves?
One thing about having small children is that they teach you. Wonder is our birthright. All this time I thought, well, I need to teach my children these tools. No, my daughter knows how to wonder. She's wondering all the time. She's chasing her wonders around, and it's a matter of letting the world not snuff that out. And so can the rest of us remember what we've forgotten? Reclaim that sense of awe and wonder inside of us. And so I'm going to offer a song that that I've been writing for Anandi. She's 4 now, and we began to sing the song as we walk to the beach every morning. And now it will be a children's book that comes out next year, because it's like, oh, revolutionary love begins at birth. And it's like this 400-page book condensed into a nursery rhyme. That's what my husband taught me. He's like, okay, fine. But I had to write that to get here. So I'll give you a few verses. You have to pretend that you're all 4. Okay. Ants on a leaf, birds in the sky, sweet little bee, trees so high. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa. You're a part of me I don't yet know. You can say it with me too. People walk by, faces are new, so many colors, points of view. Where have they been? What have they seen? Their stories show me everything. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. Sad stories make me turn away, but I keep listening, I get brave. I speak, I march, I dance, I sing. Justice is what we can bring. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. When I want to run and hide, red all over, fire inside. It's hard to wonder about anyone else, so I wonder about myself. And then it happens, like a surprise. The feeling changes before my eyes. Each feeling has a special part in showing me how to love my heart. Wonder Baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. It goes on. We wonder about people who are being mean. We wonder about the earth and the sea. And we begin to, I think the key refrain is like, when I wonder, my love can grow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. When did you say that was coming out?
August of 2024. It's called Wonder Baby.
All right. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about grieving.
Yeah.
You say the need to grieve as a people, and we need to grieve as a people and in community.
Yes.
You speak of the violent attacks of Sikh Americans following 9/11 and similar attacks throughout American history against Muslims, Asians, South Asians, Arab Americans, Latinx, Latinos, Black African Americans, and Jewish Americans. You pose a question in the book. People of color, particularly young people, ask the same question, I find. Do people of color have to be perfect in order for our lives to be grievable?
Yes.
What would you say? Where are you now with that question? What would you say to a young person who's asking that?
No, people of color do not need to be perfect for our lives to be grievable. And when people finally see us as kin, that question won't even matter anymore.
And how do we get there? How do we get people to see no stranger, right? Get them to that place of seeing each other as kin.
I remember in the wake of the mass shooting in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, in the Gurdwara, at the hands of a white supremacist, I was looking into the open coffins of people who looked like my family, and I could feel the grief in my body, and the grief was familiar, and this time it felt like the grief was making a huge black hole, like an abyss was yawning in front of me. And it was like, when you have that kind of atrocity, it sucks in all language and meaning. I think about the mass shootings we have survived in the state of Pennsylvania. It sucks in all language and meaning. And if you are in close proximity to that kind of violence, you might just fall in. You might just get swallowed whole by all that despair. And I think that moment I could have fallen in, and at just that second, the doors of the high school auditorium flung open and people began to stream in. And first there were our people, the aunties and Uncle G's, but then there were white people and black people and Asian people. There were people of all races and places. There were 3,000 people who came to grieve with us. They did not know us. Some of them didn't even know how to pronounce our names, and yet they chose to show up to grieve. They chose to see us as sister, as brother, and I was caught. I was caught in their embrace, and I didn't fall. And I could take the next breath, and I could begin to render language in the face of atrocity that could begin to tell the story. And for the story to matter, it has to be heard. Someone has to be listening. And so when I think of someone who's like, well, how do I practice this? Oh, my love, it's so simple. It's the gift of your presence. You don't have to have the right words. If you need to say something, you can say you are grieving, but you are not grieving alone. Just the act of sitting and listening and holding someone's story is life-giving, life-saving. It's the work of transformation to move that energy. So yes, we can sing again, we can march again, we can organize again, we can rise up again. That's the only reason we're here. Is because through history, through our ancestors, through our allies, to get us to this very point where we could be standing here and saying the word love is because we have been loved enough to get to this point. And now imagine if those moments weren't just aberrations on the outskirts. Imagine if it was just the way of being, the way our culture was organized. That just as people have been primed to hate, we prime ourselves now to love. That's the culture shift. That's the deep, lasting revolution, I believe, we must, we can create.
Thank you. Thank you. You say, if you see no stranger and choose to love all people, then you must fight for anyone who is suffering from the harm of injustice. What armor is needed for this generation's fight?
You know, what we have discovered, I mean, when I was coming up, it's like, all right, you want to change the world, go to law school. We have discovered there is not one type of armor, that the issues now are so intersectional, so multidimensional, so across all sectors of our society that we need people everywhere to see themselves as holding a post. No matter what discipline you're in, no matter what vocation, no matter what industry, you have a post, you have a sphere of influence. And so the question is, what is your armor? What is your armor? Is it your doctor's scalpel? Is it your artist's brush? Is it your Twitter feed? Is it your voice? Is it your pen? Is it your pocketbook? Is it your time? Is it your presence? Is it your parenting? What do you need to fortify yourself, to hold the pulse that only you hold? And that's why I believe every single one of us has a specific role in the labor that only we can play. So much of our hopelessness comes from a sense of helplessness. We believe that we don't have the agency, that the demagogues are in charge, or the corporations are in charge, or the lawmakers are in charge. But the truth is, thousands of us are co-creating culture every second. Whatever we do now, whatever we think now, whatever we say now, whatever we act now determines what happens next. And so we are the ones who hold the true power. We are the ones who can shape culture and consciousness with every breath we take. And so what does it mean not to let the little critic in us lead, but to let the wise woman in us say, oh, my love, breathe. Push, you are brave enough. You are enough.
Thank you. There is never enough time. There is never enough time, but so wonderful. I know we're going to have an opportunity for our audience here to ask questions as well. So we'll begin with that section.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I still have more.
Okay. I have a whole basket of flowers here still.
Hello, thank you for a very enlightening talk. I espouse your ideas and I've been practicing that. I can absolutely see the value of trying out those practices at the local level, at the micro level, you know, your neighbors, your family, the person, the colleague at work, and so on. How do you extend this at the macro level? Like, you know, the leaders in Russia or China, the atrocities happening there, the helplessness that you talk about. In the spiritual world, we talk about raising our consciousness, and that could make a difference out there. But do you have some concrete ideas of how we might use these practices to make a change out there?
Yes, thank you. I have been really inspired by the research coming out of Chenoweth and her team at Harvard. They studied deeply social movements in the past to determine what made them successful. And what they found was when 3.5% of a population engages in a shared nonviolent practice, it creates change throughout an entire society. 3.5%. That is 11 million people in the United States. Imagine now if 11 million people made the love ethic a conscious practice. Imagine if schools who believed in social emotional learning used revolutionary love as a compass by which they taught their children how to love others, opponents, and themselves. Imagine if companies who were practicing DEI realized that anti-racism is the bridge, beloved community is the destination, and they were teaching their people how to practice love along the way. Imagine if activists who are burning out, knew how to love themselves, knew how to not become what they were fighting against. Imagine if every single faith group, house of worship, said, well, it says love thy neighbor in our scriptures. What does it mean in a multiracial society when there's so much pain? How do we turn this into action? And so I have taken the 11 million as my metric, as our metric. And that's when I believe each of you has a role. I believe that you are the 11 million. Like 11 million to create a revolution. Imagine over this time of transition, if we could armor 11 million leaders to transition their institutions to become anti-racist, healthy, sustainable institutions, containers for beloved community, might we amass the collective wisdom to shift the culture as a whole? So I'm starting from the ground up. And I'm now seeing how people in other societies are doing the same. We're talking with Ukrainians right now who have good reason to hate the Russians who are trying to kill them. And yet they have the compass in their hands and say, well, it might not be my role to reach out to my opponents right now. My role is to stay alive. But maybe I can give others the permission to begin to wonder about those soldiers or those families who are buying that misinformation. And that aspiration alone is revolutionary. It means when the bombs are all done, when the killing has stopped, there is some fertile ground by which we can build peace. It's the long-term solution that stops the cycles that keep entrapping us. So I'm invested in the macro, beginning from in the space between us.
There's a hand back there.
Let me add, as she's going to that question, I was just in DC where we gave the compass to a whole room of state legislators from state houses all across the country. So imagine revolutionary love practiced in halls of Congress, and many of them are now taking that compass to say, okay, this can be a blueprint for our individual and collective decision making. So I believe it's the love ethic. It's Bell Hooks' vision, right? The love ethic can be the foundation for every arena of our shared life, whether we are a legislator or a mother, or both.
Thank you very much for your talk, and I've followed some of your other appearances and really find it very inspiring. But, there's always a but, as loud as your voice is and as loud as our voices are, there are voices on the opposite side that I think are drowning us out. When you have a major media company that knowingly is disseminating false information, be it about vaccines or who won the election, how is it possible for our voices to overcome that? It just seems like David fighting Goliath times 10. So how do we keep going, given the power that is trying to drown out these voices, your voice and others?
I don't know if David and Goliath holds for me. As I travel the country, I see that there are so many more of us who want a society where all of us belong. There are so many more of us who want dignity for every person. There are so many more of us who don't want those voices to prevail. The problem is that we're really tired. And not all of us have the resources, stamina, energy to exercise our voices, to keep exercising our voices. And so I believe that the solution is for the vast majority to be able to find the courage to play their role, to raise their voice. I deeply believe this because those very forces that are trying to divide us want to make us think that they are the ones who have the power, that most of the country believes exactly what they say. There are so many more people who, when you sit down beneath the slogans and the sound bites, you hear their story. And when you hear their story, you see their humanity. And when you wonder about them, they might start wondering about you too. They might start hearing your story, seeing your humanity. And when that happens, a portal opens for deep listening. Deep listening is an act of surrender. You risk being changed by what you hear, and we don't see that deep listening modeled in our political landscape or our media landscape. And so that's why I posit the locus of change in this country in spaces like this, in schools and houses of worship and companies and street corners and community centers where people are coming together to break the illusion that we're divided and separate. And when we have that magic of encounter, then we begin to understand that separateness was an illusion all along, that there is more that binds us together than drives us apart. And once we stop feeding those who want our attention, then we will prevail.
And Valerie, you cover this. You talk about, in that self-care moment, for those who have been in that struggle, who have been having those courageous and difficult conversations, there might be that fatigue factor. There's that draining. There's that sort of speaking at the wall and not getting any response. So one of the thoughts in reading your book was, with those power structures, or perception that there's this great power structure, with those power structures that appear to be overwhelming, what if collaboration? Can you speak a little bit to what collaboration looks like in that moment? A little bit about the allyship, a little bit about some of the work with those who have the resources, which you just mentioned. What does that kind of collaboration look like?
Yeah, when we do collaborate beyond what we thought was possible, we find that the bad guy is actually the institutions themselves. In New Haven, where I went to law school, I had realized that there was a supermax prison just a few miles away that was holding people in conditions of solitary confinement. And so we spent an entire year investigating this prison, and the treatment of these prisoners was tantamount to torture. I mean, 23 hours a day in a locked cage. And so we were making a documentary film about the prison to expose the cruelty, when I realized I had to follow my own advice and keep wondering, who have I not yet wondered about? I had to wonder about the correctional officers holding the keys. Now, I could have fallen into the trap of believing, well, they have nothing to do with me. They are upholding the system as it is. There's a big gulf between us. But we sat down, and as hard as it was to listen, I had to ask why? And soon, beneath their immediate defense, it crumbled, and they began to tell me that they were suffering high depression rates. They were suffering high suicide rates. They were suffering high alcoholism rates. That they felt like that they were going into a cage every day. And I realized that the bad guy in this story wasn't who I thought it was the institution itself. Now, the suffering of the prisoners was not tantamount to the suffering of the correctional officers, but once we were brave enough to say, well, this institution is hurting all of us, then we could tell a story that caught the attention of lawmakers and it took 9 years. This is an update to the book. It took 9 years. But I'm proud to say that Northern Correctional Facility in the state of Connecticut is now shut down. It's shut down. Some institutions must be reformed. Some institutions are so monstrous they must be dismantled and reimagined. And we can only do that work if we form unlikely coalitions, and that's true of every institution we have inherited.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? There's one hand in the back there.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for your words. It's such an inspiration to hear you speak in person as someone who read your book and fell in love with it. I just wanted to ask a question. So I work in a school, middle school, as a conflict resolution specialist. And I'm curious to hear what you would recommend for how this practice of revolutionary love can be used in schools. How can we teach this to kids? How can we get them thinking about revolutionary love at a young age?
Yeah. Well, the beautiful news is that it's already happening. That we have a whole learning hub at seenostranger.com with an educational curriculum that educators are downloading and using. And at first I thought, okay, they're going to use it for high schoolers, for college kids, but elementary school teachers are reading and pre-K teachers are reading, so that we will have, when the children's book comes out next August, we'll have a whole pre-K curriculum. It's just our way to get revolutionary love practices into preschools around the country from the ground up, the long-term transformation, the long-term change. So you'll find that there will be ways to put this into practice for your students, both as something to study, but also as an ethic to practice. And it has been really helpful for teachers who are figuring out how to create spaces for grieving for their kids, who are figuring out how not to shame kids for their anger, but create safe containers to process that rage, how to get students together to listen across lines of difference. You don't have to have empathy all the time. Empathy comes and goes. To feel as another, if you can lead with your wonder, that cognitive act, that practice, it's like a muscle. The more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. If you can create spaces for imagination, for resting and dreaming and imagining. I'm seeing this happen in schools that are already aware of social emotional learning. They're taking it to the next level to understand how to produce citizens that can be courageous enough, resilient enough to face the crises we have in this world. So thank you for what you do every day. You are on the front lines as an educator, and I hope that whatever we have can just fortify what you are already doing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your questions, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Valerie, thank you so much. Please join me one more time in thanking Valerie for your work. So I'm Abby Stemmelman-Hockey, and I have the good fortune of being the executive director of Interfaith Philadelphia, and we have work to do. And you have given us a new playbook, and we would really love to partner with you and Ashley and your team. We're here with this bold vision that a religiously diverse democracy can create a compassionate and just world. And we also know that it takes everyone across sectors, as you said, and it takes practice. And that these big ideas, these revolutionary ideas are not new to Philadelphia. We are at a time where we're at a crossroads where we have to reclaim what we mean by American democracy and do, as you say, widen the circle, widen our lens where everybody is included. So I was going to close tonight with a portion of your book that you referenced, but please, the books will be available this evening, and Valerie's gracious enough to sign them. You've heard a lot about these ideas and the website with the resources that we can all access. So I want to thank the team at Interfaith Philadelphia that works day in and day out with this beautiful labor. And a special shout out to Sarah Zibovitz, who made tonight be exquisitely and flawlessly beautiful. So thank you to Sarah. Thank you also to Reverend Rebecca Kirkpatrick and our colleagues at Bryn Mawr Presbyterian. You've been a founding congregation and a stalwart support of ours up until now, and please, in your programs, you see we have a lot of things coming up that you can join us in these methodologies to make our work become habit-forming and heart-changing, and we can bring these efforts to you. I think what we need to do to reach more people is to come to you in your schools, in your universities, in your workplaces, in your congregations, and let's get to work. So I'm going to close tonight with the blessing in our passport to understanding. May we have the courage to venture toward interfaith understanding. May we be graced with curiosity and humility as we welcome the stranger into our lives. May we have gratitude for the opening of our minds and the expansion of our hearts. May we have the strength to stand in solidarity with our neighbors and find comfort in knowing we are not alone. So tonight, those of us who are not online, and thank you to the probably over 100 people joining us virtually tonight, please, let's, in the spirit of See No Stranger, perhaps introduce yourself to someone you do not yet know, and take the moment to do that, perhaps in the week ahead or in the months ahead, whether you're with us in person or virtually. And we have work to do together. Thank you so much for coming tonight.